This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Jay Bilas now joins us here on the Morning Rush. And, Jay, we really appreciate you making some time for us here in the offseason. Were you a little surprised, like we were, to see Duke paired up with Arkansas?
No, not at all, because those two teams have been, two of the best teams in their respective leagues and have done well in the NCAA tournament. I think it's a marquee game, and that's what I think everybody's looking for in these things. And I'm not sure whether Duke is playing Kentucky in the Champions Classic this year or not. It would be either Kentucky or Michigan State based on who they played last year. So, there would be no reason to pair them with Kentucky again in this type of thing, even though it would be a similar marquee game.
Now, you had a unique experience at Bud Walton last year. I think Carl Ravage's plane got messed up. There was something, a traffic snafu, and you and Jimmy Dykes were actually on call together for that game. What was your first experience like inside of Bud Walton Arena last year?
It was great. I loved it. And if Jimmy had showered before the game, it would have been even better because he and Carl were coming from Lexington, and Carl went through. I think he went through Chicago and got waylaid. He couldn't get there, and Jimmy came through Charlotte and got to play all the time for the game, still wearing the same clothes he wore the night before. So, if not for the stench, it was fantastic.
Well, we've been working on that for a long time around here, Jay. We'll continue to work on Jimmy on that regard. Hey, one of the things that's difficult in basketball is the block charge play, and I know you've got strong opinions about it. The Rules Committee's making some changes. Essentially, it's going to be very difficult for the defender to draw that charge call now. What are your thoughts on some of the pending rule change or the enacted rule changes for this coming season?
I think it was a step in the right direction as far as in my view, properly calling the block charge. I think the problem is when a secondary defender comes over as a help defender and jumps in the path of a driver who'd want to pass to the basket, it was too easy to get a charge. Yeah. You had to be in position by the time the offensive player left the floor. That meant that you could hit your plant foot and the defender could still be moving into your path, and that's too late. And I think the Rules Committee finally agreed to move it back to where the offensive player is gathering to go up, and I think it makes it a little more fair to the offensive player. It was skewed toward the defense, and I didn't care for it. I know a number of officials who didn't care for it either, but there were too many people that were involved in making the rules and changing the rules that felt like it was they didn't want to change it. So I'm glad they made the change. Hopefully it'll be a positive one, but everything depends on how it's implemented.
How do you think coaches and players will adjust to that? I mean, it sounds like the default call is going to become a block, and we saw Jalen Williams, who's now with the Thunder at Arkansas, get a huge number of charge calls a few seasons ago. How do players and coaches adjust to this rule?
I think they'll adjust easily. Just because it makes it, in my view, more fair to the offensive player that's want to pass to the basket. I think they'll adjust quickly. It doesn't mean you can't still play defense. You can't block a shot. You can't knock the ball away. You can't bother a shot by defending. But it just means you're not going to be able to throw your body into the path of an offensive player that's want to pass to the basket and just cause a collision. And that's why I think it's the valuable charge, or the most valuable one, is the primary defender maintaining legal guarding position, getting a charge that way. I think we've seen changes in basketball over the years, and the players and coaches adjust really quickly. It's not a problem. The problem has been that we're really provincial in college basketball, and change is difficult. And people don't want it. The idea that, and I've heard, look, I was on the competition committee for like 10 years before I finally rolled off recently. And, I was a proponent of going to quarters. As you guys know, we have two halves in college basketball, two 20-minute halves. Well, I wanted 4 10-minute quarters. And that way you can reset team fouls at the end of the first and third quarters. And it would reduce the number of free throws on common fouls. It's just a better way to do it. And you would get pushback from some by saying, well, we don't want to be like the NBA. It's like, it's not the NBA. Every game in the world has quarters except for men's college basketball. Women's college basketball has quarters, and it works wonderfully well. We're not doing it because of commercial inventory. At least that's the excuse. And we're resistant to change. And it seems like men's college basketball is always dragged into making rules changes by every other game in the world. And I don't see why that's the case. That's why it took forever to get a 30-second shot clock, as if a good shot resided only between 30 and 35 seconds. That was ludicrous. And I'd like to see it go down to 24, but that's going to be a while coming, I think.
Hey, Jay, shifting just for a few minutes here, I want to talk about the construction of rosters. And, when we got to the Final Four last year, it was interesting to me to see the upperclassmen that were playing on the teams that were still alive. And a lot of them were transfer portal guys. You didn't have true freshmen making an impact, at least in the Final Four, the way you did in some of the other games. Where do you think we're headed in the way coaches construct rosters in terms of portal guys, true freshmen? Are there going to be fewer true freshmen on a lot of these teams that are still playing deep into March?
It kind of depends on the team and the school and the coach. You're still going to see super talented freshmen that are going to play right away and be valuable pieces to winning teams. But you are going to see a shift, and some coaches are going to decide, you know what, I'd rather have, if I'm only going to have a player for 2 years, I'd rather have a transfer that's going to play his junior and senior year and have a more experienced player come in to be new rather than a freshman coming in to be new, especially if you don't consider that freshman's going to stick around for a long time. I think, again, college basketball is really provincial. This has been unpaid labor for a long time. And the transfer portal came in primarily, if not solely, because the NCAA was fighting in court over money. And the transfer rules were making them look bad. Most people don't process this, but there was a transfer restriction in only 5 NCAA sports: football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, and hockey. In every other sport, an athlete could transfer and be eligible right away. So there was no, foundational principle about transferring, and they realized that made them look bad, and it was going to compromise their position on money issues. They lost those anyway, but that's why they made the change. If you're going to have unpaid labor and you say they're students to be treated like any other student, and an athlete is just a student who just happens to be an athlete, then you have a hard time arguing that they're assets of the university and should be restricted as if they were on a non-compete provision in an employment contract. And so that's the problem. But with the portal, which is not going away in the short run, athletes, coaches can no longer say my way or the highway, because now there's a highway, and players are taking it. So I think it's going to be a lot more honest going forward, and you may see players make good decisions or bad decisions. I don't know. But this nonsense about coaches saying, well, now at every time a player faces adversity, they leave. That's not true. We've seen a number of players that have gone from mid-major schools to major schools, have done extraordinarily well. And we've seen an equal number from major colleges that have not done as well, going down to mid-major schools and doing well. So we're gonna see it, but roster construction and having to have conversations with players that are on your roster to see if they're going to stay, things like that, those are going to continue to happen.
Jay, Ty asked you earlier about your time in Fayetteville and broadcast, I believe it was the Alabama game last year. You get to come in a day or two, you spend time with the coaching staff, you watch practice. What were your impressions of Eric Musselman and his program when you visited Fayetteville last year? What did you remember?
Well, I remember all of it. I've seen Eric Musselman before when he was at Nevada, did a couple of his games, and so I'm very familiar with how great of a coach he is. And I had done a number of Arkansas games over the years, but just oddly enough, I'd never been assigned to a game in Fayetteville. And I had said publicly it was kind of a bucket list for me to go to Bud Walton Arena and do a game there. And fortunately for me, the Alabama game was on my schedule, so it was a real pleasure for me to do that. And was able to get there the day before and spend some extra time there. So it was just a blast for me to do it. And then being able to do it with Jimmy was a special treat. So it was just a lot of fun for me.
So Jay, on that note, I mean, Cameron Indoor, Allen Fieldhouse, the Dean Dome. Where does Bud Walton of your travels stack up to the other great venues of college basketball?
It's right up there. It's just it's loud and passionate. It's just a great place for basketball. So I enjoyed every minute of it, and enjoyed being in the community and hanging out there, and all the great places to eat and barbecue, you name it. It was a blast. So everywhere you go is unique. It's not like going to an NFL stadium or an NBA arena where they're largely the same. There's so many differences in these different arenas around the country, and that's one of the things that makes it really fun. And Bud Walton was really fun. I couldn't have enjoyed my time there more.
Jay, the conversation of conference expansion has been driven by football largely, but what are the effects you're seeing, and how do you think the game will be shaped by conference expansion and realignment in the men's college basketball game?
I think it's going to continue to evolve. I know that there are a lot of people who like tradition, and they like to point to tradition, and I like it too. But if I were stuck on tradition, Duke would still be in the Southern Conference, and Texas would still be in the Southwest Conference. But that's not the way the world works. I think we've adjusted to the fact that, hey, we don't get the Missouri-Kansas rivalry anymore in the old Big 8 or the Big 12. But people adjust to this stuff really quickly, and especially in basketball. Basketball, they don't make decisions based on what conference you're in. It's your overall schedule. And would I like to see things the same as they were when I was a kid? Yeah, maybe. I'm still kind of adjusting to the Milwaukee Brewers being in the National League, for crying out loud. But it's not that big of a deal. But football may be driving this, but the truth is, what's really driving this is money. And I was with a university president recently that was saying, I think USC and UCLA are going to regret going to the Big Ten. And I didn't say anything, but in the back of my mind, I was saying, I think with $100 million, they'll get used to it pretty quickly. They made that decision based upon money, and I don't think any reasonable business person would argue with the decision.
There's no question about it. Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst and former Duke Blue Devil, kind enough to make some time for us this morning. Jay, we appreciate it, and we hope you get the call for that Arkansas-Duke game coming up at the end of November.
Looking forward to it. It'd be a blast.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.